with Gina Marie. Hey, everybody. If you're here, and thank you for that, you must be craving a classic short story. Oh, and we've got a good one for you. I'm Gina, and at the time we're recording this, we want to just send our love and prayers to all of you who are dealing with the California wildfires. And listeners, if you would like to in any way support those in need, may we suggest simply the Red Cross. It's safe, it's reputable, and you know your gift will be properly put to use. So the Red Cross suggests visiting redcross.org or calling 1-800-RED-CROSS, which is actually 1-800-733-2767, or you can text the word California Wildfires. That's all in caps, CAWILDFIRES, to 90999 if you want to make a donation. Thank you for letting me do that. Now, last week we had the privilege of bringing you the very great Shirley Jackson and her fascinating view of motherhood and ordinary family life. In her story, The Renegade, family life was anything but ordinary. You've got to check it out if you missed it. I thank you all for your likes and comments about this story, and thank you new subscribers. Welcome. Well, we have a story today from another legendary author, and this time it's F. Scott Fitzgerald. Yep, The Great Gatsby, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, that's him. Francis Scott Key Fitzgerald. Nope, he did not compose our national anthem, but he was named after the man who did, and he was his distant cousin. What a life this man led, from love and great success to real tragedy. Fitzgerald was born in St. Paul, Minnesota, just like one of our characters from today's story. Funny how that works, right? Born in 1896, his father was an unsuccessful furniture salesman. His mother was an Irish immigrant with a large inheritance. Now, this allowed the family to live an upper-middle-class life. Fitzgerald wrote well-received detective stories for his high school newspaper, and he went on to attend Princeton University, but he dropped out to join the Army. He never gave up his writing. He wrote magazine articles and lyrics for musicals. At age 21, he wrote his first novel. Okay, it was rejected by the publisher, but that same publisher gave him some wonderful praise and suggestions for his rewrite. It was during his time in the Army, while stationed in Alabama, that Fitzgerald, Northerner Fitzgerald, met and instantly fell in love with a beautiful 18-year-old Southern belle, the also legendary Zelda. A Southern belle, another character from today's story. Now, Zelda could not be convinced to marry our budding author until he could properly afford her. It wasn't until after Scribner and Sons finally agreed to publish his first novel. Well, it was after 3 novels. Rewrites. And that novel was entitled This Side of Paradise. Well, it wasn't until after that, and after he was suddenly famous and rich, that Zelda agreed to become his wife. Let me tell you, this couple knew how to enjoy a lavish lifestyle. I could go on and on about it. I already am, I know. But I'll cut it short. Scott turned out one great work after another to support that lifestyle, but that only worked to a point. He became an alcoholic, and Zelda struggled with physical and mental illness. She died in 1930 in a hospital fire. It was years before Fitzgerald recovered enough to write again. In 1937, he did. and he began writing for Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer in Hollywood. Oh, life greatly improved for him then. He even fell in love again. He had just started a new novel when he had a heart attack and died in 1940 at age 44. While living, Fitzgerald's work did not bring him the recognition and accolades that he would get later after his death. Because of the time period of today's story and this whole North and South setting, I'm going to take another moment. I'm sorry, but I have one of those sorry, not sorry moments that I need to again explain. I hope you don't mind. Despite what may have been acceptable during the time period of whatever story we're reading, I am not going to use demeaning terms for groups of people. Now, please don't get me wrong. I will not make drastic changes to the text. That would really be wrong. I simply omit the word, or I make the most minimal, I can say it, change possible. I know a few people have faulted me for this, and they're entitled to their opinion, but my response will have to remain, sorry, not sorry. All right, now, guess what I'm about to do? I'm going to finally get to the story. I know. Here we go. Published in 1920, tuck in everybody, for the first half of F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Ice Palace. The sunlight dripped over the house like golden paint over an art jar. And the freckling shadows here and there only intensified the rigor of the bath of light. The Butterworth and Larkin houses flanking were entrenched behind great stodgy trees. Only the Happer house took the full sun and all day long faced the dusty road street with a tolerant and kindly patience. This was the city of Tarleton in southernmost Georgia, September afternoon. Up in her bedroom window, Sally Carol Happer rested her 19-year-old chin on a 52-year-old sill and watched Clark Darrow's ancient Ford turn the corner. Oh, that car was hot. Being partly metallic, it retained all the heat it absorbed and evolved. And Clark Darrow, sitting bolt upright at the wheel, wore a pained, strained expression as though he considered himself a spare part and rather likely to break. He laboriously crossed two dust ruts, the wheels squeaking indignantly at the encounter, and then, with a terrifying expression, he gave the steering wheel a final wrench and deposited self and car approximately in front of the Happer steps. There was a plaintive heaving sound, a death rattle, followed by a short silence, and then the air was rent by a startling whistle. Sally Carol gazed down sleepily. She started to yawn, but finding this quite impossible unless she raised her chin from the windowsill, changed her mind and continued silently to regard the car, whose owner sat brilliantly, if perfunctorily, at attention as he waited for an answer to his signal. After a moment, the whistle once more split the dusty air. "Oh, good morning." With difficulty, Clark twisted his tall body round and bent a distorted glance on the window. "'Tain't morning, Sally Carrol." "Isn't it sure enough?" "What you doing?"
"Eating an apple."
"Well, come on, go swimming. You want to?"
"I reckon so."
"How about hurrying up?"
"Sure enough."
Sally Carrol sighed voluminously and raised herself with profound inertia from the floor, where she had been occupied in alternately destroying parts of a green apple and painting paper dolls for her younger sister. She approached a mirror, regarded her expression with a pleased and pleasant languor, dabbed 2 spots of rouge on her lips and a grain of powder on her nose, and covered her bobbed corn-colored hair with a rose-littered sunbonnet. Then she kicked over the painting water, said, "Oh, damn," but let it lay, and left the room.
"How you, Clark?"
she inquired a minute later as she slipped nimbly over the side of the car. "Mighty fine, Sally Carrol."
"Where we go swimming?"
"Out to Wally's pool. I told Mary Lynn we'd call by and get her and Joe Ewing." Clark was dark and lean, and when on foot was rather inclined to stoop. His eyes were ominous, and his expression somewhat petulant, except when startlingly illuminated by one of his frequent smiles. Clark had a income, just enough to keep himself in ease, and his car in gasoline, and he had spent the 2 years since he graduated from Georgia Tech in dozing round the lazy streets of his hometown, discussing how he could best invest his capital for an immediate fortune. Hanging round, he found not at all difficult. A crowd of little girls had grown up beautifully, the amazing Sally Carrol foremost among them, and they enjoyed being swum with and danced with and made love to in the flower-filled summery evenings. Oh, and they all liked Clark immensely. Now, when feminine company palled, there were 6 other youths who were always just about to do something, and meanwhile were quite willing to join him in a few holes of a golf or a game of billiards or the consumption of a quart of hard yellow liquor. Now, every once in a while, one of these contemporaries made a farewell round of calls before going up to New York or Philadelphia or Pittsburgh to go into business. But mostly, they just stayed round in this languid paradise of dreamy skies and firefly evenings and noisy street fairs, and especially of gracious, soft-voiced girls who were brought up on memories instead of money. The Ford, having been excited into a sort of restless, resentful life, Clark and Sally Carrol rolled and rattled down Valley Avenue into Jefferson Street, where the dust road became a pavement, along Opiate Millicent Place, where there were 6 prosperous, substantial mansions, and on into the downtown section. Driving was perilous here, for it was shopping time. The population idled casually across the streets, and a drove of low, moaning oxen were being urged along in front of a placid streetcar. Even the shops seemed only yawning their doors and blinking their windows in the sunshine, before retiring into a state of utter and finite coma.
"Sally Carroll," said Clark suddenly, "it a fact that you're engaged?" She looked at him quickly.
Where'd you hear that?
"Sure enough, you engaged?"
Oh, that's a nice question.
"Girl told me you were engaged to a Yankee you met in Asheville last summer."
Sally Carroll sighed.
"I never saw such an old town for rumors. Don't marry a Yankee, Sally Carroll. We need you round here."
Sally Carroll was silent a moment.
"Clark," she demanded suddenly, "who on earth shall I marry?" "I offer my services."
"Oh, honey, you couldn't support a wife," she answered cheerfully. "Well, anyway, I know you too well to fall in love with you."
"That doesn't mean you ought to marry a Yankee," he persisted.
"Suppose I love him?" He shook his head.
"You couldn't. He'd be a lot different from us, every way."
He broke off as he halted the car in front of a rambling, dilapidated house. Mary Lynn Wade and Joe Ewing appeared in the doorway.
"'Lo, Sally Carroll.
Hi.
How y'all?"
Sally Carroll,
demanded Mary Lynn as they started off again.
you engaged?
"Lordy, where'd all this start? Can't I look at a man without everybody in town engaging me to him?"
Clark stared straight in front of him at a bolt on the clattering windshield.
"Sally Carroll,"
he said with a curious intensity.
"don't you like us?
"What?"
Us, down here."
"Oh, why, Clark, you know I do. I adore all you boys."
"Then why you getting engaged to a Yankee?"
"Clark, I don't know. I'm not sure what I'll do, but, well, I want to go places and see people. I want my mind to grow. I want to live where things happen on a big scale."
"What you mean?"
"Oh, Clark, I love you, and I love Joe here, and Ben Arrett, and y'all, but you'll...
"We'll all be failures?"
Yes, I don't mean only money failures, but just sort of ineffectual and sad and, oh, how can I tell you?"
"You mean because we stay here in Tarleton?"
"Yes, Clark, and because you like it and never want to change things or think or go ahead." He nodded, and she reached over and pressed his hand. "Clark," she said softly, "I wouldn't change you for the world. You're sweet the way you are. Why, the things that'll make you fail, I love always. The living in the past, the lazy days and nights you have, and all your carelessness and generosity."
"But you're going away."
"Yes, because I couldn't ever marry you. You've a place in my heart no one else ever could have. But tied down here, oh, I'd get restless. I'd feel I was wasting myself. Now, you know, there's two sides to me. There's the sleepy old side you love, and there's a sort of energy, the feeling that makes me do wild things. Now, that's the part of me that may be useful somewhere. That will last when I'm not beautiful anymore." She broke off with characteristic suddenness and sighed. "Ah, sweet cookie," as her mood changed. closing her eyes and tipping back her head till it rested on the seat back. She let the savory breeze fan her eyes and ripple the fluffy curls of her bobbed hair. They were in the country now, hurrying between tangled growths of bright green coppice and grass and tall trees that sent sprays of foliage to hang a cool welcome over the road. Now, here and there, they passed a battered cabin, its oldest white-haired inhabitant smoking a corncob pipe beside the door, and a half-dozen scantily clothed children parading tattered dolls on the wild-grown grass in front. Farther out were lazy cotton fields, where even the workers seemed intangible shadows lent by the sun to the earth, not for toil, but to while away some age-old tradition in the golden September fields. And round the drowsy picturesqueness, over the trees and shacks and muddy rivers, flowed the heat, never hostile, only comforting, like a great warm, nourishing bosom for the infant earth. Sally Carrol, we're here.
Aw, poor child, sound asleep.
Honey, you dead at last out of sheer laziness?
Water, Sally Carrol, cool water, waitin' for you.
Her eyes opened sleepily.
Hi,
She murmured, smiling. Stay with me. I'll be right back. Part 2. In November, Harry Bellamy, tall, broad, and brisk, came down from his northern city to spend 4 days. His intention was to settle a matter that had been hanging fire since he and Sally Carrol had met in Asheville, North Carolina, in midsummer. The settlement took only a quiet afternoon and an evening in front of a glowing open fire For Harry Bellamy had everything she wanted. And besides, she loved him with that side of her she kept especially for loving. Sally Carrol had several rather clearly defined sides. On his last afternoon, they walked, and she found their steps tending half unconsciously toward one of her favorite haunts, the cemetery. When it came in sight, gray-white and golden green under the cheerful late sun, she paused, irresolute, by the iron gate. "Are you mournful by nature, Harry?" she asked, with a faint smile.
"Mournful? Not I."
"Well, then, let's go in here. It depresses some folks, but I like it." They passed through the gateway and followed a path that led through a wavy valley of graves, dusty gray and moldy for the 50s, quaintly carved with flowers and jars for the 70s, ornate and hideous for the 90s, with fat marble cherubs lying in sodden sleep on stone pillows, and great impossible growths of nameless granite flowers. Occasionally they saw a kneeling figure with tributary flowers, but over most of the graves lay silence and withered leaves, with only the fragrance that their own shadowy memories could waken in living minds. They reached the top of a hill where they were fronted by a tall, round headstone, freckled with dark spots of damp and half grown over with vines. "Marjorie Lee," she read, "1844 to 1873. Now, wasn't she nice? She died when she was 29. Oh, dear Marjorie Lee," she added softly. "Can't you see her, Harry?" "Yes, Sally Carrol." He felt a little hand insert itself into his. "She was dark, I think, and she always wore her hair with a ribbon in it and gorgeous hoop skirts of Alice blue and old rose." "Yes." "Oh, she was sweet, Harry, and well, she was the sort of girl born to stand on a wide, pillared porch and welcome folks in. I think perhaps a lot of men went away to war meaning to come back to her. But maybe none of them ever did." He stooped down close to the stone, hunting for any record of marriage. "There's nothing here to show." "Well, of course not. How could there be anything there better than just Marjorie Lee and that eloquent date?" She drew close to him, and an unexpected lump came into his throat as her yellow hair brushed his cheek. "You see how she was, don't you, Harry?" "I see," he agreed gently. "I see through your precious eyes. Oh, you're beautiful now, so I know she must have been." Silent and close they stood, and he could feel her shoulders trembling a little. An ambling breeze swept up the hill and stirred the rim of her floppity hat. "Let's go down there." She was pointing to a flat stretch on the other side of the hill where, along the green turf, were 1,000 grayish-white crosses stretching in endless, ordered rows like the stacked arms of a battalion. "Those are the Confederate dead," said Sally Carrol, simply. They walked along and read the inscriptions, always only a name and a date, sometimes quite indecipherable. "The last row is the saddest. You see? Way over there. Every cross has just a date on it. And the word unknown." She looked at him, and her eyes brimmed with tears. "I can't tell you how real it is to me, darling, if you don't know." "Well, how you feel about it is beautiful to me." No, it's not me. It's them. That old time that I've tried to have live in me. These were just men, unimportant, evidently, or they wouldn't have been unknown, but they died for the most beautiful thing in the world, the dead South. You see," she continued, her voice still husky, her eyes glistening with tears, "people have these dreams. They fasten on to things. Well, I've always grown up with that dream. It was so easy because it was all dead. And there weren't any disillusions coming to me. I tried in a way to live up to those past standards of noblesse oblige. There's just the last remnants of it, you know, like the roses of an old garden just dying all around us. There's streaks of strange courtliness and chivalry in some of these boys. Oh, and stories I used to hear from a Confederate soldier who lived next door, and a few old others. Oh, Harry, there was something. There was something. I couldn't ever make you understand, but it was there." "I understand," he assured her quietly. Sally Carrol smiled, dried her eyes on the tip of a handkerchief protruding from his breast pocket. "Now you don't feel depressed, do you, lover? Even when I cry, I'm happy here, and I get a sort of strength from it." Hand in hand they turned and walked slowly away. Finding soft grass, she drew him down to a seat beside her, with their backs against the remnants of a low, broken wall. "I wish those 3 old women would clear out," he complained. "I want to kiss you, Sally Carrol." "Me too." They waited impatiently for the 3 bent figures to move off, and then she kissed him until the sky seemed to fade out and all her smiles and tears to vanish in an ecstasy of eternal seconds. Afterward, they walked slowly back together, while on the corner twilights played at somnolent black and white checkers with the end of the day. "You'll be up about mid-January," he said, "and you've got to stay a month at least. It'll be slick. There's a winter carnival on, and if you've never seen snow, it'll be like fairyland to you. There'll be skating and skiing and tobogganing and sleigh riding and all sorts of torchlight parades on snowshoes. They haven't had one for years, so
They're going to make it a knockout.
Will I be cold, Harry? She asked suddenly.
You certainly won't. You may freeze your nose, but you won't be shivery cold. Oh, it's hard and dry, you know.
I guess I'm a summer child. I don't like any cold I've ever seen. She broke off, and they were both silent for a minute.
Sally Carrol,
He said very slowly,
what do you say to march?
I say, I love you.
March.
March, Harry. Part 3. All night in the Pullman, it was very cold. She rang for the porter to ask for another blanket, and when he couldn't give her one, she tried vainly by squeezing down into the bottom of her berth and doubling back the bedclothes to snatch a few hours' sleep. She wanted to look her best in the morning. She rose at 6 and, sliding uncomfortably into her clothes, stumbled up to the diner for a cup of coffee. The snow had filtered into the vestibules and covered the floor with a slippery coating. It was intriguing, this cold. It crept in everywhere. Her breath was quite visible, and she blew into the air with a naive enjoyment. Seated in the diner, she stared out the window at white hills and valleys and scattered pines, whose every branch was a green platter for a cold feast of snow. Sometimes a solitary farmhouse would fly by, ugly and bleak and lone on the white waste, and with each one she had an instant of chill compassion for the souls shut in there, waiting for spring. As she left the diner and swayed back into the Pullman, she experienced a surging rush of energy and wondered if she was feeling the bracing air of which Harry had spoken. This was the North. The North, her land, now. Then blow ye winds, hi-ho, a-rovin' I will go, she chanted exultantly to herself.
What's that?
Inquired the porter politely. Oh, I said, brush me off. The long wires of the telegraph poles doubled. 2 tracks ran up beside the train. 3, 4. Came a succession of white-roofed houses, a glimpse of a trolley car with frosted windows. Streets. More streets. The city. She stood for a dazed moment in the frosty station before she saw 3 fur-bundled figures descending upon her.
There she is. Oh, Sally Carrol.
Sally Carrol dropped her bag. Hi. A faintly familiar, icy cold face kissed her. And then she was in a group of faces, all apparently emitting great clouds of heavy smoke. She was shaking hands. There were Gordon, a short, eager man of 30, who looked like an amateur knocked-about model for Harry, and his wife, Myra, a listless lady with flaxen hair under a fur automobile cap. Almost immediately, Sally Carrol thought of her as vaguely Scandinavian. A cheerful chauffeur adopted her bag, and amid ricochets of half-phrases, exclamations, and perfunctory, listless "my dears" from Myra, they swept each other from the station. And then they were in a sedan bound through a crooked succession of snowy streets where dozens of little boys were hitching sleds behind grocery wagons and automobiles. "Oh!" cried Sally Carrol. "I want to do that. Can we, Harry?" "Well, that's for kids, but we might." "It looks like such a circus," she said, regretfully. Home was a rambling frame house set on a white lap of snow, and there she met a big gray-haired man of whom she approved, and a lady who was like an egg, and who kissed her. These were Harry's parents. There was a breathless, indescribable hour crammed full of half-sentences, hot water, bacon and eggs, and confusion. And after that, she was alone with Harry in the library, asking him if she dared smoke. It was a large room with a Madonna over the fireplace and rows upon rows of books in covers of light gold and dark gold and shiny red. All the chairs had little lace squares where one's head should rest, and the couch was just comfortable. The books looked as if they had been read, some, and Sally Carrol had an instantaneous vision of the battered old library at home, with her father's huge medical books and the oil paintings of her 3 great-uncles, and the old couch that had been mended up for 45 years and was still luxurious to dream in. This room struck her as being neither attractive nor particularly otherwise. It was simply a room with a lot of fairly expensive things in it that all looked about 15 years old. "What do you think of it up here?" demanded Harry, eagerly. "Does it surprise you? Is it what you expected, I mean?" "You are, Harry," she said quietly, and reached out her arms to him. But after a brief kiss, he seemed anxious to extort enthusiasm from her. "The town, I mean. Do you like it? Can you feel the pep in the air?" "Harry," she laughed, "you'll have to give me time. You can't just fling questions at me." She puffed at her cigarette with a sigh of contentment. "Well, one thing I want to ask you," he began, rather apologetically. "Now, you Southerners put quite an emphasis on family and all that. Not that it isn't quite all right, but you'll find it a little different here. I mean, well, you'll notice a lot of things that'll seem to you sort of a vulgar display at first, Sally Carrol. But, now, just remember that this is a 3-generation town. Everybody has a father, and about half of us have grandfathers, but back of that, we don't go." "Of course," she murmured.
Our grandfathers, you see, founded the place, and a lot of them had to take some, well, pretty queer jobs while they were doing the founding. For instance, there's one woman who at present is about the social model for the town. Well, her father was the first public ash man. Things like that.
Why? Said Sally Carrol, puzzled. Did you suppose I was going to make remarks about people?
Oh, no, not at all, interrupted Harry. And I'm not apologizing for anyone either. It's just that, well, a Southern girl came up here last summer and said some unfortunate things. And, well, I just thought I'd tell you. Sally Carrol felt suddenly indignant, as though she had been unjustly spanked. But Harry evidently considered the subject closed, for he went on with a great surge of enthusiasm. Oh, it is carnival time, you know. It's the first in 10 years. And there's an ice palace they're building right now. That's the first they've had since '85. Built out of blocks of the clearest ice they could find on a tremendous scale. She rose, and walking to the window, pushed aside the heavy Turkish portieres and looked out. "Oh!" she cried suddenly. "There's 2 little boys making a snowman. Oh, Harry, do you reckon I can go out and help 'em?" "You dream. You come here and kiss me." She left the window rather reluctantly. "I don't guess this is a very kissable climate, is it? I mean, it makes you so you don't want to sit round, doesn't it?" "Oh, we're not going to. I've got a vacation for the first week you're here. And there's a dinner dance tonight."
"Oh, Harry," she confessed, subsiding in a heap, half in his lap, half in the pillows. "I sure do feel confused. I haven't got an idea whether I like it or not, and I don't know what people expect or anything. You'll have to tell me, honey."
"I'll tell you," he said softly. "If you'll just tell me you're glad to be here."
"Oh, glad? Just awful glad," she whispered, insinuating herself into his arms in her own peculiar way. "Where you are is home for me, Harry." And as she said this, she had the feeling, for almost the first time in her life, that she was acting a part. You be sure to come back next week for the conclusion, won't you? Because you don't want to miss that ice palace part. I believe Sally Carrol kind of wishes she had. Introduction information for this episode is from PBS Biographies and their article entitled F. Scott Fitzgerald and the American Dream, and other sources in our show notes. Music for today is Shelter from Andrew Gialinella, Midnight on the Water from John Reichman, Scott Nygaard, and Sharon Gilchrist, Theme from Southern Comfort from Ry Cooter. Saudade from Sangre de Muerdago. Hey, why not join our conversations? You can, right here in comments, or you can email us at fastasleepwithginamarie44@gmail.com, or find us on Instagram, Facebook, and once in a while, TikTok. It really is your reviews and likes and comments and those subscriptions. They all keep us here. Yep, for you. And I thank you for listening. Keyword, home. So next week, the best part of this story. It's the conclusion of F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Ice Palace. Good night.